Ready?
Okay guys, ready to go back live?
All right, I'm Bob Wolfe, and I'm going to do an ornament, a globe with finials, and on the way, are they seeing this?
Yeah, for overhead.
Okay, yeah. What I'm going to do is this ornament here. The one next to it is basically the same thing that I bored out to about 1/8 of an inch thick, and then used a pierce tool, which we aren't going to be able to do today. And then the one next to it on the outside, this one here, that is done with wood burning. So you've got several variations that you can do with the basic globe. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Get these off the lathe and start turning here. There is a write-up that will be on the website that goes through the instructions and has some pictorials. So if you can pick that up on the website. So what I started out with is a piece of cherry. You can use cherry, birch, any wood that you want for the globe. The best thing you can do is find a piece of wood that has some character to it, unless you're going to paint it. The more prettier the grain, the prettier the globe's going to be. So anyway, so you start out with about a 4-inch piece. This is the square block. This is cherry. And to save time, basically I put it between centers, and I turned a tendon, and I put it in the lathe. So all that out of the way, saved a little bit of time. Okay, the next item is that in order to make the globe, I have to measure what the diameter of the piece is, and so I got calipers, and it doesn't matter what it is. It's just if you want to make a spherical, you want to go ahead and have a mark. So the next item I'm going to do is to make sure that I keep that reference, because as I start turning, I'll lose that reference. So I'll take a cutoff tool, and this happens to be one that I use a lot. And hold on just a second, we're not using face shield, so I am going to put on goggles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut along that index. I'm going to go down about 7/8 of an inch diameter. To almost 3/4. Okay, that's basically going to be my globe. What I'll do is I will start roughing the globe, and I will use a spindle gouge. There are several different tools that you can use, but basically, well, before we start that, sorry, I got out of sync. What I want to do is I want to go ahead and put a whole index.
We're losing. We lost the signal. Stop.
Okay. We lost the signal here, or they can't see it. Okay, so basically what I want to do is I want to go ahead and bore a hole in the center of the ornament in order to hollow it out. So you take I'm using a 5/8 drill, and I want to drill deep enough. I want to drill deep enough that I can go ahead and hollow out the center, but not to the end of the globe. So I'll take this measurement and I'll reduce it down by a little bit over 1/8 of an inch, and I've got this mark. Okay, I've got some tape, so where the hole would end, I mark it, and so I can see it. I've got a piece of tape. Now that tells me that that's how deep I can go ahead and drill that hole. And turn your speed down and bore it out. This isn't super critical. I use 5/8. You can use a 3/4 if you got a little bit larger globe. This one seems to work pretty well. Clear your chips. I go to the tape, and that's as deep as I need to go. And unless you want an elbow bruise or contusion, you take the drill out of the tailstock and put it to the side. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and start to create the globe shape. I turn it pretty high speed, and let's see if we can. Now the nice thing about this is I'm not very good at doing spheres. For some reason I don't really picture it very well. So in this particular shape, if you want to go perfectly with a sphere, you can hold a golf ball up and it'll give you the orientation that you're looking for. And actually that's pretty close. But it's not super critical because all my ornaments look a little bit different. They all have a little bit different shape. But if you want a perfect sphere, go ahead and use yourself, get yourself an index. And I take these edge just right to the pilot hole that you have. So this is 5/8. That's as far in as I go there. I'll go on the other side and start to make the other half of the globe. And the thing about making spheres and globes and doing this work is the more pieces that you do, the better you get at it. This one's a little bit of an egg shape. I can see that already. But again, when you get it up on the tree, that doesn't really matter. Now what you don't want to do is you don't want to go ahead and go down to 5/8 deep, because if you do that, you could lose your ball and your little sphere. And so when you have a sphere and you cut too deep, you see what happens. It blows out. And it happens to me periodically, and you could probably salvage that by using a larger finial. But you know, if you want to hold that in place, which is what we're looking to do, that's what you do there. I'm not going to mess around with the shape a whole lot more. What you will do is take some sandpaper, and you would normally go all the way through the grits. I'm not going to go all the way through the grits, but what I have noticed is if you take I'm taking 120, and if you just sand it lightly, especially if you're trying to make a sphere or something, you can, once you've done a little bit of sanding, you can actually see the form a little bit better, and you can go back with your spindle and clean it up. But quite honestly, that's going to look good enough for what we're looking to do and demonstrate. But you can finesse and make this as good as you want. You would normally I would do all my sanding on this sphere right now, all the way down to, I use 400 or 600. I'm going to take it to 320, just because at this particular point, this is when I normally finish this, do my first finish. The first finish that I use is 888. And The nice thing about AAA is that you don't have to worry about the dust. It's pretty easy to put on, but you put a coat on with a paper towel. Do not use a cloth. If a cloth wraps around, it could drag your thumb in there and do some real damage. But once you get it on there, this is a friction polish, and so you can get it warmer and more friction by holding it tighter. But once you're finished using and applying, then go to a clean spot, and for virtually no work at all, I got a pretty good finish. Once I finish the ornament and glue the finials on, I'll come back and I'll spray a lacquer on there, and we can go over that a little bit later. Again, all these steps and all the supplies are in that handout that I was talking to you about. So at this point, we got a nice sphere, but it is it's a solid sphere. It's pretty heavy, and depending on your tree, it'll hang pretty low. Pull that branch down on a little tree. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to hollow it out. I use a Hunter tool. This is their small Hunter tool. It's a straight tool, and it has a number one. It's a number one. It's got number. Thank you, Skip. It's got a number one cutter on it. It's a carbide. They last forever. And once you feel like it's not cutting well, you can loosen up the little set screw, rotate it about 20 degrees, and tighten it up, and you got a brand new cutting surface on that tool. So when I set this up, basically what you want is when it's flat, you want the cutting to be at about midpoint, maybe just a slightly bit lower. But the important thing about this tool is when you start cutting, you don't want it parallel. That is the most aggressive cut there is. Well, it's not the most. If you have it actually away from where you're cutting, you can actually get a pretty bad catch. But so when you go in, you'll go in about 7:30, and that's looking from the tailstock forward. The bottom of the cutter edge would be about 7:30 o'clock. And you want a pretty high speed. And what you do is you slowly work on it. Now, Hunter tool has a tool that has a hook on it so that you can do a better job with some spheres, but with a globe this size, the straight one works just fine. Okay, the other thing you want to do is you want to periodically turn it off and with an air hose, or soda straw would be great, but I forgot it. So the question is, how do you know how deep you are? Well, experience helps, but even with experience, I've had blowouts where it's not at the end, but it's in the middle, and there's not much you can do with that globe. So what you do is get yourself, there are many different types of depth gauges. I particularly like this one. The nice thing about this is you put it in the globe, you push this to the inside wall and touch this to the outside, and then you adjust the thumb screw until it just touches. Then you open it up, pull it out, and you say that's exactly what the thickness is. So let's do that now. So on the back of the globe, got a long ways to go. To get to the center, you have to turn it around, which is no big deal. And yeah, I'm just going to turn it up like this, but you can see I haven't adjusted it, but I've taken significantly more out of the center than I have on the tail end. So I'm getting close, but let's see how close I am. So you open it up, pull it out. Still got quite a bit of clearance, so I'm going to go ahead and take some more.
Where'd you get that?
It'll be on the reference. This is another one that's a really nice one. It's a little different in that as you close it down, it has an index and then has the numbers, and this one's in millimeters. And although you can't see that gap, when it's in the vessel, you can see on the index that you're 2 millimeters or whatever thick. So let's go ahead and continue. Hopefully we don't blow through this one. The other thing is you can tell by the sound it's a higher pitch. The other thing is that when it gets thin, it'll be more of a hollow sound. I know it's a lot of fun to watch me blow through it, but quite honestly, it's not much fun watching somebody hollow. We'll see. This one's in the center. It's still a little bit close. Okay, I got ways to go. So yeah, do it one more time. And I'm going to call that pretty much good. It's a little more hollow, but the technique, you just work on it until you're comfortable with the thickness. If it's not thick enough, or if it's not thin enough, just keep working on it slowly. The thing is, check it very often as you get to the point where it's at right now. But what I'm going to do is show you how to get that glow off of that we're going to go ahead and go back to, my drill bit, put it in, get your tool rest out of the way. First thing I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to go ahead and cut that down. Right now that's about 7/8 to 3/4. I want to take it down to a smaller diameter than the 5/8. So that when this drills through, it'll go through the wall of the shell of the globe. And so in order to do that, that's why we only drilled in and left about 1/4 or 1/8 of an inch gap. So let's go ahead and cut this back down to below 5/8. Looks like that's less than 5/8. You can check that by gapping the drill, and I haven't gone far enough. So sometimes the eye isn't as good as you think it is. At least my eye isn't. Well, and that's what I didn't want to do, but basically I drilled in too deep. But what would normally happen is I would go ahead and put the drill to the back. I would turn on the lathe, and this would be turning, and then as I go through and advance the drill, it would part off and stop turning, and that's how you know how far to go. And so what you have now is a hollow sphere. That's the main body of your ornament. Now we'll start working on the finial. Again, on the finial, you start out with about 1 1/4 square block. You turn it down, you put a tenon, on it, and you put it in a chuck and center it. And this one should be fairly close, but I'm going to be cutting away so much of this it really doesn't matter at this point. So go ahead and tighten it, make sure it's tight. And now we're going to go ahead and there are several ways of cutting this taper down, but I'm using a bowl gouge and scraping. It's just very simple, very easy, very quick, and actually gives you a pretty good So what you want to do is you want to get this down to a nice trying to get all this removed with a spindle gouge can take quite a bit of time. So now we're going to start on the finial. Went from a bowl gouge to a spindle gouge again. You want a pretty good speed here. That's what you call a catch. So now I got a point. It is the problem I'm having is obviously my technique, but it's also a different lathe, and when you're doing fine work, you know, your body gets used to the cut being in a certain position. At least that's what I'm going to blame it on. So you start out with some sort of a point. This is where you do your own design. And go ahead and put that showing up. Now the important thing about making a finial is you get to the point where you move further and further towards the headstock, and when you thin it down for the finial, you can't go back and do a lot of heavy work. So once you get it where you like it, so these components here, I'm pretty much finished with them. I can do some light sanding, but I can't go back and take any heavy cuts on those. They're just too delicate and they will break. And again, there's 1,001 different things you can do. But what you're trying to do is get a smooth transition, and then you can pretty much do whatever you want to do. I haven't done this before. This, I'm going to go ahead and put a spear back of it. But you want to take into consideration that you've got a sphere that's a certain size, so you can't make this finial like 6 inches long on a 1.5 inch diameter. It's just going to look ridiculous. So you want to try to keep your design in mind as to what you want to do. This is maple and does a pretty nice job. It's pretty reasonable expense-wise, and I'm going to go ahead and move on. That's my sphere.
Is that one of the bat billets?
What?
Is that one of our bat billets?
This is from the baseball bat billets. I kind of like a little offset in it. There's names for these different functions. I don't know what they are. Skip is the expert on this, so I'm just trying to show you what I do, and if I were you, I would get with Mr. Skip and see some of the work that he's done. It's just unbelievable. But all right, so let's assume that that's all I want to do with that. So that's going to be the thickness or length of my finial. I put a little bit of a back cut. Now I'm going to go ahead and part most of the way. I didn't turn off the lathe, but I was pulling it away from the lathe. The biggest problem you run into adjusting this is when you're going in towards the piece and it hangs, and then you push a little harder and then it goes beyond where you really want it to be. Okay, if you remember, the hole that we had, unless we blew out the bottom of the hole, is 5/8. So I need to go ahead and turn that down to 5/8, and I need my caliper, which is up on the lathe, which it shouldn't be. And you can see that I got quite a ways to go. And remember, you want to be just a little bit less than 5/8 because it's fairly delicate and it's very, very tough to sand this once you've taken it off the lathe. Now the other thing you need to take into consideration is that I got a spherical and it's got a cone. Well, if I were to just cut this straight off, I'd end up with a flat and I'd have the rim hanging out on the outside. I want the rim to be against the cone. So what I normally do at this point is I take a fine small cutoff and I'll go in at maybe a 20-degree angle and make a cut. Now I got room for that dome to fit up inside of this. And again, I would do any sanding down here when all this was not there. And at this point, this one can be cut off. Before I completely cut it off, a lot of people, when they have a pretty wood like cherry, really like the contrast. The white and the cherry isn't really very striking to me. What most people like is they like the ebony look, and if you've gone and priced out ebony, it's pretty darn expensive. But I could take this and take some liquid, it's actually leather dye, it's black leather dye, and when it's on the lathe you turn down really slow, take a sponge brush, dip it in there and just apply it. And I happen to have, through the magic of cameras and what have you, this is one that I did yesterday, and I went ahead and applied the black, and it goes on real quickly, it dries fairly quickly, but it gives a very nice looking ornament. And from 1.5 feet, 2 feet back, you can't really tell it's not ebony, especially if you go ahead and sand it and get it nice and clean and polished, and then use a lacquer on it, and it looked just like ebony, and it saves you a lot of money. So at this point, after you've finished it and you're ready to go, you cut it off, and we've got so with any luck, I'll find what I turn. And now I've got, that's a little bit too short. It probably ought to be probably another 3/4 of an inch longer than it is.
No, right on the edge.
Right on the edge. Okay, you can see it's a little short. It really ought to be about 3/4 of an inch taller, but at this point what I would probably do is I wouldn't glue it on there. I'd go ahead and make a smaller ornament and use that finial, because there's nothing magical about that finial to this sphere. So now I need to go ahead and make the base, or the cap. And again, this is one that I did yesterday, and cut the cap and took the black dye, and that would be on the other side. But we've got enough work, we've got enough wood right here to go ahead and do that, so let's go ahead and proceed. The cap is about the easiest thing you can make on this project. And you could do pretty much anything you want design-wise. What you don't want is you don't want your cap standing up an inch above your globe. You want a fairly low profile. Okay, so you make a little top to the cap, and that will be where you can screw in your eye screw. I will take my live center, and I want that eyelet in the center. Well, the best place to do it is using a live center. Use the point indexes it. Finish with it, pull it out, and then I've got a small drill. This is like a jeweler's drill. You can get these at hobby shops. The diameter of this thing is much less than 1/8 of an inch. But the nice thing about it is I take that center piece, that center punch hole, and I drill it. Now it's ready for an eyelet. You can go to Ace Hardware, and right now you probably can't get these because Bob Wolfe went out and bought all the ones that they had, and I think they stock it once a year. But I did go online and get a whole bag of these. I got 100 of them, so if you need some, give me a call. I'll give you 10 of them if you want to use them. If you're lazy, you just hold it on there, and there's your eyelet. So now I got to go ahead and cut this off, and again, I want it to go into a 5/8 inch end of the ornament. So now I'm going to cut and it is surprising to me that I can't index this any better than I do with my eyes, but I guess that's just due to the fact that my eyes are old. And again, you want to fit around the globe, so you've got to go in there and back cut it so that it's got a place to seat. And now that's my cap. Okay, here's what I was telling you about. This cap, get a close up of this. Okay. See how it's a little bit elevated? The recess that I put in there was not good enough, plus normally I ended up with this huge flat area when it broke off, and I didn't go back and clean it up. Normally what I do is I transition that more, and so that'd be more of a dome. Right now it's so flat that the piece that fits on there is a little bit proud. Now it's not too bad, and it kind of replicates the offsets that I've got, so I'm not too upset with that. The biggest problem with this is that the bottom finial is not long enough, and again, you want to use the golden rule. And so you can look that up in the book and see I got a sphere that's certain diameter, certain height. If it's a sphere, it's the same. And so that's an ornament. What you can do is you glue it on, and once you glue it up together, what I do is I go ahead and hang it from a string. And I'm not going to use this here, but this is what I use. It's a Masters lacquer. This one's gloss, high gloss. They sell this at the woodwork shop. And for very little effort, you can spray this once, twice. It dries in 5 minutes. You can put a second coat on there. You get a great finish, and it's done. There's no sanding after you spray this on. So no need to polish.